Hello, my dear students. Welcome to the second part of the poem Mending Wall, written by Robert Frost from the second unit Heights of Harmony. In the first video of Mending Wall, dealing with the first 11 lines of the poem, we have already seen how the wall gets damaged every spring season. Students, I'm sure that all of you are now familiar with the wall mentioned in the poem. Which is the wall mentioned here? Yes, it is of course the wall that divides the properties of the poet and his neighbor. Now, what happens to the wall? The wall gets damaged every spring season. The poet says that it is some unknown force in nature that creates gaps in between the wall. Now, let's see what the poet is going to do with this broken boundary wall. Okay, students, let's now discuss the poem Mending Wall from the 12th line of the first stanza. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. We keep the wall between us as we go. From these lines, it is very clear that it is the poet who notices the broken wall first. The poet's neighbor is unaware of the damage caused because he lives beyond the hill. So the poet goes and informs his neighbor and fixes a date to repair the wall. As decided, they meet each other on the appointed day to fix the wall. Students, I want all of you to read these lines carefully to see how they behave when they meet each other after a long time. They first walk along the wall to inspect the damages caused to the wall. But as they walk along the boundary wall, they are very careful not to trespass into each other's plot. The line, we keep the wall between us as we go, is a clear indication of the lack of friendship and intimacy between the two neighbors. Moreover, in the line, we set the wall between us once again. We can undoubtedly feel the presence of two kinds of wall. Yes, the first one is the physical wall or the wall that divides their properties. And the other wall is the mental wall that exists in the minds of the neighbors. My dear students, let me remind you once again that this wall plays a very important role throughout the poem. It acts as a metaphor symbolizing the unhealthy and unfriendly relationship between the poet and his neighbor. Being neighbors, it is very strange to note that they meet only once in a year, and that too to mend the unfriendly wall that has broken during spring. So, we can say that it is the spring season that reunites these neighbors to update their friendship. Even though the nature tries to bring them closer, they move away from each other by building walls. Therefore, we can consider this poem as a sad reflection of today's society where man-made wall exists between people, between groups, between nations based on caste, race, religion and nationality.
ഓരോ സ്പ്രിംഗ് സീസണിലും താൻ നടത്തുന്ന മതിൽ പൊളിക്കലിലൂടെ യഥാർത്ഥത്തിൽ കവിക്കും അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ അയൽക്കാരനും ഇടയിലുള്ള മനസ്സിൻ്റെ മതിൽ തകർത്ത് പുതിയൊരു അടുപ്പമുണ്ടാക്കാനായിരിക്കാം ഒരുപക്ഷെ പ്രകൃതി ആഗ്രഹിക്കുന്നത്. പക്ഷേ ഇതൊന്നും അറിയാതെ, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അല്പം പോലും ശ്രദ്ധിക്കാൻ കൂട്ടാക്കാതെ, പണ്ട് മുതലേ തങ്ങൾ വളർത്തിയെടുത്ത ഒറ്റപ്പെടലിൻ്റെയും ഏകാന്തതയുടെയും സൗഹൃദമില്ലായ്മയുടെയും മതിലുകൾ അറിയാതെ കെട്ടിയുയർത്തിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ് കവിയും അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ അയൽക്കാരനും കൂടി ഇവിടെ.
Moving on to the next lines. To each the boulders that have fallen to each, and some are loaves and some so nearly balls. We have to use a spell to make them balance. Stay where you are until our backs are turned. We wear our fingers rough with handling them. Here we get a clear idea about how difficult it is to maintain this stone wall. It is very difficult to balance these boulders one over the other because of its irregular shapes. The poet says that some are rectangular in shape and resembles a loaf or a bread, while some are round as a ball. Here, the poet has used the poetic device metaphor to describe the shapes of the boulders. Then the poet humorously describes that he had to use some spell or a magic in order to balance the boulders one over the other. The moment he keeps a boulder and turns to pick up another one, the whole thing would have come down. So, in the line, "Stay where you are until our backs are turned," we find the poet threatening or commanding the boulders to stay in its position until he picks up another one.
തങ്ങളുടെ മതിൽകെട്ടലിനെ രസകരമായി വർണ്ണിക്കുന്ന കവി ഇനിയും അതവിടെ ഉറപ്പിച്ചു നിർത്താൻ എന്തെങ്കിലും മാജിക് വേണ്ടിവരുമോ എന്ന് ഒരു വേള ചിന്തിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. ഉറപ്പിച്ചു വയ്ക്കും മുമ്പ് തന്നെ ഉരുണ്ടു വീഴാൻ തിടുക്കപ്പെടുന്ന കല്ലുകളെ നോക്കി ഒരമ്മയുടെ സ്നേഹശകാരം പോലെ ഇത് കഴിഞ്ഞ് ഞങ്ങൾ തിരിയും വരെയെങ്കിലും അവിടെ തന്നെ ഇരുന്നോണം എന്ന് പറയുന്ന കവിയെയാണ് നമുക്കിവിടെ കാണാൻ സാധിക്കുന്നത്.
Dear students, what do you feel after reading these lines? Do you think that the poet is actually enjoying the task of mending this boundary wall? Not at all. The poet is actually fed up of this boring task of mending the wall. He even says that his hands become rough and often get injured after handling these boulders. In the very next line he says, "Oh, just another kind of outdoor game, one on a side." Here, the poet tries to bring some delight to this boring work of repairing the wall by considering it to be an outdoor game where he and his neighbor are busy playing with the stone with a net or a wall in between. It is said that Robert Frost was so fond of tennis. Maybe he is trying to bring some amusement to this tiring and dull work of repairing the wall to an outdoor game like tennis. Okay, students, let's now move to the concluding lines of the first stanza. It comes to little more there where it is we do not need the wall. He's all pine and I am apple orchard. My apple trees will never get across and eat the cones under his pines. I tell him. He only says, "Good fences make good neighbors." Here, the poet tries to convince his neighbor that the wall is totally needless and mending this boundary wall is a futile effort as it gets destructed every spring season. The poet here tries to justify his thought by saying that the apples on his farmland will never trespass into his neighbor's plot and eat the pine cones. But the neighbor seems to be unmoved by the poet's words. He only responds with an old proverb, good fences make good neighbors. Dear students, these lines also exposes the difference in attitude of the poet and his neighbor. While the poet is not at all interested in repairing the boundary wall, the neighbor seems to be so stubborn. He insists on repairing the wall. He is not at all ready to accept any change. Rather, he feels so proud in sticking on to his father's words that good fences make good neighbors. The poet, on the other hand, seems to be a person with a broad outlook. He believes in a relationship based on love and trust. That is why he considers wall as a barrier to their friendship, which is causing him a great deal of emotional isolation and loneliness. Therefore, we can say that the poem Mending Wall is about two neighbors who disagrees over the need of a wall to separate their properties. With this, we come to the end of the second video of this poem Mending Wall. We'll be back soon with a third video. Until then, it's goodbye.